Okay, we're good. Hey, good afternoon. I'm Greg LaRose, politics editor and reporter with NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune. And, Fridays in our world tend to be a little low-key. I cover business as well, and Fridays, I guess we kind of recoup and look back at the week that's passed. This Friday, very different. If you've been watching along with Senate Judiciary Committee confirmation hearings, unprecedented, historical. In our newsroom, we've just sort of been slack-jawed at times of figuring out what's going on. So we thought we'd jump here on Facebook to give you a chance to weigh in with what you've seen, what your thoughts are, any questions you might have, and give you a little Schoolhouse Rock version of what's been transpiring the past couple of days, and especially today when we thought the Senate Judiciary Committee was simply going to have an up or down vote on Brett Kavanaugh. And of course, you know, he's facing allegations from 3 women about sexual misconduct dating back to the 1980s. Yesterday, full of emotional testimony from one of his accusers, Christine Blasey Ford, and of course, Kavanaugh himself, who at times angrily defended himself against those accusations. So let's see if we can give you a recap of what took place today. So again, we were expecting just that up or down vote, how it would fall. This committee is divided with a slight edge to Republicans, who of course now control both chambers of Congress. In the committee, 11 members of the GOP, 10 members of the Democratic Party. And there were 2 to 3 votes on the Republican side that I think going into today, there was a big question mark on where they would land. Jeff Flake, the retiring senator from Arizona, being among them. He put out a statement before today's committee meeting saying that he would indeed support Kavanaugh. On his way to the hearing, he was cornered, I guess you could say, by some women as he was entering an elevator who begged with him, pleaded with him to reconsider his vote. Flake is a moderate Republican who's seen more left-leaning than lots of his colleagues. And so we get to the point where there's the expected speeches from senators on the committee announcing why they would vote the way they would vote, reaching the point really where Democrats walked out into the hallway calling it a farce, that there would not be a delay. So the vote transpires. It happens pretty much like we expected it along party lines, 11 to 10. And then Flake announces that he would like to see a delay in the confirmation schedule on the full Senate floor to where the FBI would be able to investigate in a short time frame and narrow scope the allegations against Kavanaugh. I'm reading that to believe that they strictly wanted to limit that to what Professor Ford revealed to them yesterday. And so there's this discussion going on in the committee after the vote to advance Kavanaugh as to whether or not they could put forward that delay. There's some back and forth, wondering whether or not can the committee do it. Does Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, have ultimate say there? And before it could come up in a vote before the committee, the chairman, Chuck Grassley, essentially adjourns. He cites what some are describing as an arcane rule. It's really like a parliamentary procedure rule that there was a 2-hour limit on the hearing, which of course they had long since surpassed. At that point, it essentially had killed any type of vote for moving forward. But now what we're seeing is that evidently there had been discussions among GOP leaders as to whether or not such an investigation would end up happening. I think the insider's thought is that while, of course, it obviously on the surface looks good to have that investigation, there's some question marks on whether or not the Republicans have all the votes they need in the Senate to give Kavanaugh a full confirmation. So let's look at a breakdown of the Senate. It's made up of 51 Republicans, 47 Democrats, 2 independents who typically caucus vote with Democrats. So let's go ahead and say that there are 49 Democrats in the Senate versus 51 members of the Republican Party. So 2 votes are sort of question mark there, although they have leaned towards conservative voting history, and that would be Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. There's also one Democrat who's not really come out and said how he would vote on the floor, Joe Manchin of West Virginia. And of course, all of this is within the context of the elections coming up in November, where you have red states that tend to swing now a little more blue just in terms of opinions of the Trump administration. And this is all taking place in that context. Speaking of Trump, he's weighed in on this, the events that transpired today, and has essentially kind of left it up to the Senate leadership to decide, could they delay that vote on Kavanaugh a little bit further. So hopefully there is, again, a Schoolhouse Rock explanation of just how we got to where we are today, where we're heading next week, whether or not we'll have that vote as scheduled early in the week, or will we see the FBI jump in and launch that in investigation, as Flake has called for, narrow in scope, short in time frame. So with that, we'll check in and see with Frankie to see anyone with questions or comments that we could get to. Yeah, it's good questions. Basically, why now? Why are these coming forward? And there's essentially, we've seen 2 schools of thought emerge on this. One sort of victim-centered, another that I guess you could say would be politics-centered. The victims of sexual abuse, sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, whatever you'd want to call it, will speak to the victim really, not wanting to or not feeling comfortable in the right state of mind or feeling repercussions, a litany of reasons that victims have for not coming forward. Politically, clearly, you heard from Professor Ford yesterday that, she reached out through various channels, congressionally, through the press, when the name of possible nominees to the Supreme Court came forward. And it wasn't until after that where, she really was urged to come forward and didn't want to at first, and didn't want senators to come out and interview her personally. She, left, I think, most feeling as though that, her complaints were valid. Then there's schools of thought thinking that, okay, she was assaulted, but it wasn't by Kavanaugh, or as she says, she's 100% sure it was Kavanaugh. Clearly, timing is everything, and that we are so close to the actual vote on Kavanaugh today by the committee, and next week likely by the Senate, that I think there's going to continue to be questions as to why it took so long, why wasn't there this investigation in earnest. And I don't know that we're going to land on one answer that satisfies the people asking those questions in both those spheres.
Gotcha. So what happens if the FBI investigation doesn't find anything new?
I would think they just move forward. The question is, what if the FBI investigates but doesn't find anything to, lend merit to Professor Ford or the other women's claims? If they go that far with the scope of the investigation, I would think that, this basically stays on the fast track, that the GOP, not knowing whether or not, they'll hold a majority after fall elections, I don't obviously see them waiting to do this and allowing a more thorough investigation, but I think they just move forward with a vote as soon as they can.
Okay, so this is all on a national scale.
What does this mean for us on a local level? What does it mean for us locally? That's a really good question. I think it lands more in the arena of the continuing discussions we're having about the Me Too movement, about and I think history is going to go back much like it did when Anita Hill testified in the confirmation hearings of Clarence Thomas, is that, how far have we progressed or not progressed in encouraging victims of sexual harassment, sexual abuse, or to come forward and be acknowledged. I think that's really where we'll see, a local take on this. Those discussions are going to continue, not just in politics, in the workplace, in schools, in any sort of situation, I think, where leadership, per se, has to confront climate where someone, whether it be for their gender, their sexual preference, the color of their skin, for whatever reason, they feel as though marginalized or not able to come forward with a complaint. So we'll be talking about this, no doubt, for years, if not decades to come.
Where does Louisiana's representation in Senate stand on this?
Louisiana's representation on this particular issue, Senators Cassidy and Kennedy land firmly in the corner of Kavanaugh. They support him wholeheartedly. I'll do it even quicker than the first time, just to bring the broadcast to a close. So today we had an 11-10 vote in favor of Judge Kavanaugh to advance him to the full Senate floor for a vote on his confirmation. Senator Jeff Flake is asking the Senate leadership to delay the vote for a week so the FBI can conduct an investigation that is narrow in scope and time before that vote would take place. He mentioned about wanting to be more comfortable about the likely yes vote that he's going to cast. Senate GOP leadership is saying that, we're going to think about that. I think there's, we might be able to do that. But the insider thought is that it's more about ensuring that the GOP has the votes to carry Kavanaugh over the top, more so perhaps than looking into the actual merits of what the investigation would look into. That's going to be it. I'm Greg LaRose for NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune. Thanks for checking in with us.